they say that they're going to release it. And I'm just like, when? Please release it for Christmas, please. So
that's funny. There's some large companies out there who are sweating bullets right now, just knowing that their credit card flow is insecure, but Justin's waiting for the CSS release.
Yep.
All right, everybody, how's it going? Welcome to our last episode of the year. So we just wanted to give a really big thank you and shout out to everybody from the critical thinking community. All of you who have been there from day one up until maybe this is even your first episode. We just, we can't really thank you enough for everything that you've done. It's been amazing to see the community come together and consume our podcast and give us feedback and interact with everybody. And it's just been an amazing year overall. We definitely couldn't have asked for anything better. So, shout out to you guys. You guys made this happen. Thank you to everybody in the Discord. Thank you to everybody on YouTube. Thank you to everybody on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and just everywhere. It's been amazing to see the outpour from the bug bounty community to our podcast. And it really just is giving us a signal that we need to keep doing what we're doing. So, thanks again for all of that. And we're really looking forward to what's going to be coming in the next year. This episode is really just a very chill sort of recap for me and Justin. We're going to be going over our sort of year in review, the trends that we had in our own personal hacking experience, some of the things that we'd like to be doing next year and moving forward. And like I said, thank you to everybody for listening. Thanks for, sharing the podcast, supporting us. We really appreciate it. And we can't wait to see what happens next year.
All right, we're rolling. So you were saying you have 10 gig now in your house?
Yeah, so I mean, technically, I'm only getting like 7.8 gig down and like 4 gig up. But I mean, it could be worse.
7.8 gig down, is that what you said? Per second?
Yeah, per second.
Holy crap, dude. What'd you have to do to get that?
They wanted me to sign up. Honestly, they sent me a letter in the mail. They're like, "Hey, we're we're rolling
this
out
guy's a sucker."
they sent out all these things in the mail, and they were like, speeds up to 10 gigs, and I was like,
"Holy crap!"
Okay, we'll see about that. It's a local one to the Bay Area called Sonic.
Wow, that's crazy.
So they
man.
It's crazy. So it's dude, it's $50 a month.
No way.
Yeah,
I thought they were at least priced. That's cheaper than mine, dude.
That's it's cheaper than. So I used to pay for a different ISP. I used to get 1,000 down, and I paid for higher upload speed for 35 megabits up. And I paid $85 a month for that.
That's what mine is. Yeah.
And then I got this letter in the mail, and they were like, speeds up to 10 gig. I was like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. I look it up. And, they're like, oh, yeah, it's available in your area. $50 a month, 3 months free. I was like,
yeah, okay, whatever. As he types it into the search bar.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, we'll see.
As he clicks the sign up button.
Yeah, because I always look for, a better deal if there's one there. So, and sure enough, they had it. And they were like, here's the status. We're laying lines. And, I signed up, and sure enough, they came and they installed like a fiber termination box and stuff.
I was gonna say, did they have to dig through your whole front yard or something like that?
No, so they run the fiber on the poles here because we don't have like snow or anything like that. Sure. And they basically just teed it off from the pole up to the roof of my house, and then they ran it through my attic and down into my office, and they terminated it with an ONT just like on the wall. There's a fiber line coming through my ceiling.
Did you have to cut like a bunch of holes in your wall?
No, there's a single drill hole that they put like a little flange around, and the fiber line just runs along my ceiling, along the wall, terminates here because I don't have Ethernet throughout my house. Otherwise, I would have done it somewhere else. And then it just connects to my server, and my server pushes everything out. It's crazy.
Wow, dude, that's crazy. Your server rack behind you there has better internet connection than in some freaking data centers now.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, you could probably see it. So I've got some really fancy schmancy stuff here. This is a 24 port 10 gig switch. Okay, so it's got 24 Ethernet ports, and each Ethernet port puts out 10 gigs. It does 300 gig per second throughput.
Oh my
It
goodness.
can do 25 gig service.
Did you
It's
buy
like
all of this recently? So it cost you
these two,
$50
yes.
to upgrade, but then you spent an extra $1,000 in hardware in the first week.
yeah. No, these two are new. These are new fancy
Can your computer
upgrades that
even
I
deal with it? Like,
Yeah, so no. Yeah. So both of my computers, the best adapters that I have do 2.5 gig. So I can saturate those for sure. Like I've done speed tests on my laptop at like 2.5 gig.
wow.
The speeds that I'm getting right now are coming directly from the gateway. But yeah, I have adapters coming in the mail that
All
will
right, so
give me 10
real
gig
talk,
on
though.
my devices.
How much did you spend on all of the crap surrounding your new 10 gig upgrade? Also, you're moving. You're going to be moving in the next, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay. So here's the thing.
You ain't gonna get those speeds in East Coast, man. It's not gonna happen.
I probably won't get those speeds from my ISP. What this does do is it gives me internal 10 gig. So my whole internal network has 10 gig speeds now.
All right,
so I can transfer files between my NAS at 10 gig speeds. I can transfer things between devices, all that kind of stuff at 10 gig speeds, which is
I guess
a
that's
nice
cool
perk.
If you have like a media server or something like that.
Which I do.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. That's what that is.
Nice.
And then the hardware was about $2,000.
Oh my god!
For the upgrade, dude, 10 gig stuff is expensive.
That's more expensive than I was thinking, man. What the heck? I was getting ready to cringe at you saying $500.
No. So the gateway, like the gateway, if it was just the gateway, that would have been $500. The real expensive stuff is when you start to have like multiple terminations of 10 gig. So just for some context here, and I know we're rambling a little bit, but
hey, it's Christmas time.
Like a USB/Thunderbolt adapter for like a laptop. So like a Mac, right? It has all USB-C Thunderbolt 4 ports or something.
Yeah.
An adapter for that does 10 gig is $250.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And like the switching, honestly, like the switches and stuff are cheaper than it is to buy the adapters for the actual endpoints. Like my PC is going to use a PCI Express 10 gig adapter. That's like $70. That's not like too bad, right? Like that's doable. $250 for like,
that's nuts.
It's crazy. So some of these things are like really, really expensive just because it's not a widely used. So like most people, right? Like you could buy a 2.5 gig adapter readily. Most people don't need more than 2.5 gig. I contacted my ISP because I was like, hey, I got my equipment set up and I did tests and I'm not getting my full 10 gig speeds. I'm only getting like 7.5 down and like 4 up. And they were like, okay, well, like on our end, it looks like we're delivering the full 10 to you, but like I don't think anybody in your area is gonna have anything close to that. But let me look. And like he looked and he was like, all right, well, nobody has anything close to that, but like the closest I could find is somebody has an Eero that's got like 2.5 gigs symmetric, and they're not having any problems. So, let me know like if you find what the problem is. I was like, okay,
they
whatever.
Didn't expect you to go drop, freaking $2,000 on all the equipment you needed to like call them out on their bullshit on their 10 gigs up and down. That's crazy,
for sure.
Man.
Like I don't think most people have this level of equipment, but I like fancy toys.
Your home setup is pretty badass, and your automation setup and that sort of thing, it's pretty great. So definitely makes sense that you would invest in that. And since we're already off topic, I might as well take us a little bit further. Well, this one's tangentially on topic that I was just going to talk about a little later. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for anyone who is following along on YouTube. But dude, check this out. So I recently, can you see my screen yet?
Yep.
So I recently set up, so sort of inspired by your Python-based sort of encoding, decoding systems, the various modules you've set up over the years. I told you I was working on my own sort of keyboard shortcut oriented sort of utility system, let's call it that, right? Where you can do URL encoding, decoding, base64 encoding, decoding, and that sort of thing. And then I thought, man, this would be really cool if it had a sort of a UI based portion of it, right? And so I found this tool right here. This is called Flow, and it's like a little launcher and you can program it with Python modules. And so I wrote a bunch of Python. I just installed it last night, but I wrote a bunch of Python modules for it. And one of them is like this, like JWT, right? And then I can paste in a JWT, and it will go ahead and open it right away in like JWT.io or something like that, right? Let me see if I can get it to show. Yeah, like this, right? And then it'll inject it right into JWT.io to make it easy to see. And I've got it doing like various hex parsing and URL encoding and decoding really quickly. And one of the ones that I found the most useful is this one. Check this one out. So I pop this open and I type MRR, right? Match and replace regex. And essentially what it'll do is it'll allow me to specify in the first parameter of this, I'll specify a, and for those of you listening, it's just a small box on my screen that's popping up, and I type a little command into it, and it will show me the output in that same little box, or copy it to my clipboard. So what this one does is it does match and replace regex on what is in my clipboard. So I can say like, okay, let me go ahead and replace every A character with a B character, right? And if I go ahead and just copy this command and run it. Now, the contents of my clipboard is MRRBB instead of MRRAB, right? So like all of the time when I'm trying to work on stuff, like I'm wanting to strip out new line characters, or I'm wanting to remove every character that's not a number or something like that. And then I've got to either do it manually, or I've got to write a little Python script for it. And now I've just kind of got this really easy plugin based launcher system that will go ahead and run all of those match and replace regexes for me and that sort of thing, and remove various, like for example, the scenarios where you need to remove a backslash, right? Because you're copying escaped JSON into normal JSON. So you can do that sort of thing. And then some of the other things I've got on my list that I haven't fully built out yet is I want to have it like quick query ChatGPT 3.5. and be able to do that. And I also want to be able to have it do OCR automatically, where I'll like have a picture in my clipboard, and then I'll just hit like OCR, and it will take all the text out of that picture and copy it into my clipboard. I just feel like that'd be super badass.
All right, so for OCR, I have a thing for you. It's there's a tool called Powertoys. It's actually written, by Microsoft.
I saw this. Yeah, Powertoys.
Yeah, the guy who, So he has there's like an OCR utility built into that. That's open source.
Oh, really? So have you set up this Powertoys run thing?
Yeah, I have it. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
The other thing, Finney's Textgrab.
Why aren't you using this for your like Powertoys or Flow or anything like that for your encoding modules?
So there's a couple reasons. The main thing is it's extra overhead. So for Mac, this reminds me a lot of this. There's a tool called Alfred.
Yeah,
Alfred, which is it's kind of like it basically just looks like your Spotlight, but it has a bunch of different tools, and you can do all the same kind of stuff. You can have it run scripts and custom handling and all that kind of stuff. It's very, very, very similar. So I imagine you could probably do the same thing with Alfred on Mac.
Yeah.
For me, I like being able to like chain them together and like have sort of the flexibility that I have because it's a programming language. So because I'm doing it in Python, I have all the manipulation factors of like strings and indexes and lists and like the subtypes, like the primitive types and stuff that you have access to in Python that make it easy to sort of manipulate data in more ways than like you can technically do it with like the setup that you have. For me, I can basically, just because they're functions, I can just easily like, scrap something together, and it's a little less.
And I guess, And I guess in a Python context as well, you can press the up button or whatever, and it'll show you the previous command, and you can redo the same command over and over again rather than having to like save it and then paste it and that sort of thing.
Right.
I'll have to see if my Flow has like a history thing. But what I was thinking was like, you could actually just define a query in Flow. Launcher. Dude, Bagel is
this cat. Yeah, I don't know if we told people. I got another cat. Her name's Bagel. She's a kitten, and she's just like the most curious little. She looks like she's hunting something right now.
She's so cute. I can't even deal with it, man.
Interesting. Yeah, she's very, very cute.
Yeah, but what I was thinking was like you could use the Flow plugin system to actually just be able to write all of your stuff in the Flow little box that pops up, right? And then you have it just copy it back to you. I don't know. There's something really cool to me about having something in your clipboard and then modifying it and then, being able to paste it again. Or even maybe having it selected and then you hit something and it does it, because it just makes everything a lot more seamless, I think. So
I was just talking about this. I was talking about this with somebody else, but I use my clipboard as like a buffer, basically like a temporary buffer, like all the time.
Yeah.
And I use, especially in Python, there's this this module called Pyperclip.
Yeah,
PY.
Pyperclip, yeah.
Yeah, like it's basically Paperclip, but PY. And it's cross-platform clipboard reading and writing, and it's so useful.
Yeah.
Because you just from Pyperclip import copy paste, and then you have two functions, copy paste, and they copy and paste from your clipboard. And then it's really awesome because you can chain stuff together, like you said. You can basically copy, wrap it around something that reads from your paste, and it just transforms your clipboard and makes everything super easy. So yeah, I love that kind of the little flows, makes the little helper functions, all that kind of stuff makes it so much easier.
It really does. And I guess just one last question on this note, do you know if Powertoys has the capability to do Python based plugins?
I don't know about that, but the reason I brought up Powertoys was because Powertoys uses this OCR project, and I think I sent it to you. It's called Textgrab.
Okay.
But you can probably use that because you're on Windows. You can probably use that for the OCR stuff. On Mac, I think there's built-in libraries like preview and stuff. On Mac, the OCR is like really good. I don't know I think it's an internal thing that Apple does, but it works really well. You can just take a picture and you can just select text from it.
Oh, just like
everywhere. Yeah, you can just open if you open a PNG, on your phone, on your Mac, like it works the same on all of them. And basically, if there's text in an image, it will just let you highlight it and copy it out. And
no way.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, dude, frick! I'm pretty firmly anti-Mac, but you've been kind of winning me over the past
it's really
year
good, dude.
of talking to you every week for at least an hour and a half. That there's a lot of stuff that it just comes built in and is simple and easy to use that I probably would have to go and set up and think I'm so cool for setting up, but like then I realize everyone's got this if you're just using a Mac. So
yeah, and like the thing is, I my powerful computer is mainly my Windows desktop.
Yeah.
But I really hate hacking on it because it's not that you can't set everything up. I think like for almost everything there is a parallel, or even just you can install it in one way or another using WSL or some Windows wrapper of the same tool or whatever. Yeah. But like it's really just having to do that extra stuff of like, does this work on Windows? Is this a Windows problem? Okay, what do I need to install to make this work on Windows? And now what do I have to do to like make it work within those bounds? Instead of on Mac, I just feel like most of the time, if it's some sort of Unix-based tool, there's probably a Mac port for it. If not, I can probably install it from source, and I'm going to be good to go, like, just like I would be on a Linux box. And that just makes things a lot easier to work with. But it's expensive. Yeah. It's expensive, and like they tend to have sort of planned obsolescence. Where they're after 5-6 years, your Mac is not going to be as good as the ones that are coming out now, and you're going to want to upgrade. And
that's the same case for everything, man. I bought a laptop in 2020, like a mega powerful 3.5K laptop, and I was like, this thing's going to last me forever, and I can barely use it now. It's just when we're using it every single day and we're traveling with it to the live hacking events and that sort of thing, you put some miles on the thing, and you just got to replace them every couple of years. I've kind of come to grips with that.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely like one of the more unfortunate costs of doing business within like Bug Bounty is that like, we use expensive, high power hardware and we use the shit out of it, and we burn it into the ground. Basically,
with Caido now, we may not even need to use that highly expensive hardware.
I'll downgrade my RAM amount, perhaps.
Seriously, man, there's no reason I need to have 128 gigs of RAM in this computer that I'm on right now. It's like, this is ridiculous. This is overkill from almost everything except for opening just the smallest burp project.
It's so crazy. Honestly, if I could have like a Hackintosh easier, like in an easier way, I would probably like strongly consider doing that. I really only use Windows for like gaming. and like, you know.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I just want to bring that conversation back around to Bug Bounty about the launcher thing, because I've used it already today and yesterday, and a little bit yesterday when doing Bug Bounty related stuff, and it's so handy for getting, if you have a system in place to be able to write plugins quickly to transform data in your clipboard, or transform data that you're highlighting, or maybe even like Joel does, transform data that you're sort of pasting into a Python module or whatever. It really helps reduce the friction of ideation during exploitation, and also you just feel leet as heck when you're doing it. So I would encourage any of you guys, when you're like, you're too brain fried, or you're too, in the weeds, and you got to step out and do something else for a little bit. Maybe you might work on setting up your launcher or your automation setup when it comes to this sort of thing. I think they get value for that. Yeah,
I will say also, like, because of the way that you've set it up, where it's running Python. Yeah. That means that it's extensible. So like you could take the stuff that I'm doing, all the functions and stuff that I've already written, you could just wrap them in like a script that runs that function specifically.
Could you send that to me?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I'll actually send you it, because
that'd be good.
I'll send you whatever I have. And you can basically just do that, where then if you want to use them sort of in like a IPython or in the console, you can do that, but you can also run them sort of from anywhere.
We should clean it up actually and release it to the critical thinkers tier on Discord. I think they'd probably really like that. Yeah, that'd be good.
I'm super down. Yep, I have a module called PyHack, so I'll send it over to you.
Sweet, that sounds good. All right, well, we're already 20 minutes in and we haven't even covered any of the things that we were going to talk about. So let's get to the news. Nice old-fashioned Justin and Joel style episode this time around. We've been doing a lot of guest and masterclass and all sorts of special stuff lately. So good to get back to the good old Justin and Joel structure.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing that I had first on the news for today was the CTF by Frans Rosen that went out December 15th. There's been a revival of CTF, particularly XSS CTF on Twitter. We see a lot of releases from Joach's Car and Franz and Matthias, and I did one or two. So it's really cool to see those come back. And this one that Franz did was definitely something I've never seen before. I actually didn't have the chance to solve it before he released the solution because I had a really busy week. But this is definitely a really cool payload. Did you see it? It's in the doc.
Yeah, I did. So I spent a bunch of time looking at this, and I was going down the right path actually, because I noticed I noticed right away that in the escape for regex function, and this will make more sense if you've actually looked at the challenge, but there's essentially two parts, right? There's escape for regex and escape for HTML. And the escape for regex takes in like the regex parameter name and then escapes it so it can be used as a regex. And then the escape for HTML takes the value, escapes it so it can be used in HTML, puts it in the HTML. Does like a match and replace. And I had noticed pretty early on that there was some really weird replace. They were using a very strange syntax. Okay. They were using $$ and I was like, what the fuck is that? Like that's like super weird. And so I looked into it and I found, it references some like what was it?
It's like it's a syntax language for replacing things
the match substring.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you're familiar with regex, you probably know that like $number is very common for replace groups. Like if you have select groups, $0 is the whole match, $1 is the first group, $2 is the second group, $3 is the third group, so on. But I had never seen $& or any of these other ones. I only knew about the indexes. And for named groups, you can also do like $, with like a name if you have a name that's assigned with the group, but that's also a less common syntax. And that was kind of as far as I got. Like I'd spent a bunch of time looking at possible like how it was escaping and all that kind of stuff. I had a suspicion that potentially there was something with the regex, but I didn't really go down that, and then I got sidetracked and never really got to finish it. And so when I saw that he tweeted out the hint and was like, $. I was like, okay, for sure, this is something with the regex. I just don't have time to do this. But that kind of confirms my suspicion. And then he came out with the hint. And when I saw what the intended solution was, it caught me off guard again, because it was not just a $, but also like another nuance. And so it was very cool. He linked out to the Mozilla
the
JavaScript
MGN
reference docs. Yeah. And there's this section called specifying a string as the replacement. And this is on the string.replace, like prototype function docs. And it says that there's these different patterns: $$ for a $, literal, $ampersand for the match substring, $backtick for the portion of the string that precedes the match substring, $apostrophe for the portion of the string that follows the matched substring, and then $n for the numbers, like we talked about, and $name for named groups.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
I was
man.
just like,
so much functionality here. It's like, what the heck?
Yeah, so I haven't gotten to mess with this yet, but did you mess with it?
I messed with it a ton, and well, but after he released the solution, I was like, wow, this is super cool. And whenever I see this sort of thing, it makes me think like, how can I look at this exploit, this specific scenario where this worked, and try to apply this to a bigger concept or idea? And the thing that kind of came to mind was this is like input modification or input expansion, right? Like, how can you take your user input and get it to do something different, or do something, what am I trying to say? Or to modify the content of that. And we see this all the time when you're bypassing sanitization. We see this when there's modifications being done or functions being called on your input after a certain check is being done, something like that. Those are common patterns. And this as well, anytime your input is being placed into a scenario where it's being used as
a modifier,
as a modifier, or as like almost like code, right? It's like a pseudo code. It's not really code, but it's like a could be interpreted as string, or it could be interpreted as code. You need to look at those situations very closely, because there's almost always some weird shit that can go on.
Yeah, because I think if you look at this challenge, like in retrospect, like obviously, like I knew from the very beginning, like, this isn't gonna require me to find a 0 day in Google Tag Manager. Yeah, like for sure. Like, there's not, like, he's not hinting at a 0 day. This is using like the latest version. Like, it's got to be something about the implementation. That's one of the advantages about CTFs and like challenges like this in general, that there's a solution. So the question is like, what are you missing? And that gives you more opportunities to sort of think creatively, which is what I really like about these types of things. Yeah, think critically even. But I will say, like, definitely your spidey sense probably should have been triggered a little bit if, when you were looking at like how this is working and seeing that it was taking your input and making a regex out of it.
Yeah. Right? Well, it's pretty much the only functionality on the page. The script is only like 35 lines long, and when you look at it, everything else is pretty standard. Right. There's like 10 lines that go to like parsing out a query string and that sort of thing. So pretty much the only weird part of this situation is the replace function. And I guess we kind of dove into the details, and we didn't give quite as good of an explanation for those of you that haven't seen the XSS challenge. So if you're still hanging in there with us at this point, thank you. But the scenario was that there was a script tag that was being dynamically created, and what ended up happening, and they were using string replace in JavaScript for it, and what ended up being the problem with this is this whole concept of being able to inject these what are they called, like group modifiers or into the replace portion of the replace call, which will allow you to take the preceding bit of what actually was being matched. So in this scenario, that was a script tag that had access to the double quote character. So when you put that in, that same double quote that was preceding your user input would get put into the replace text. And then that would break out of the HTML attribute context and give you the ability to insert a arbitrary HTML attribute, which led to XSS. So really crazy.
It's super interesting. Yeah, like when I write regex, I've definitely come across an instance where I understand why this exists, because oftentimes you'll try and match something before a group or whatever, and like maybe you need to know what that is, so you'll put it in a separate group and then you just reference it by its index or whatever. But instead, this essentially takes the default behavior that you can have a regex that matches a whole string, but also has groups within it, and you can get a portion before that match. It's a very niche use case, but I can understand why it exists, and I'm definitely gonna have to look at some of the bugs I've submitted, because I think that
well, it underlies, it emphasizes one of the things that we've talked about here often, which is regex. They're used all the time for security, and they're very hard to make properly secure. So really knowing your regex stuff inside, outside, upside down in PHP, in JavaScript, in Python, in all of these various languages, all of them have different quirks. And this whole concept of, getting control or being able to inject the pre-match string and the post-match string and that match string in the result of a replacement is something that you'll also see in other languages, and is something that is more widely applicable to regex in general. So whenever these sort of techniques come out, you got to go back and look at, okay, what reports have I submitted that have anything to do with regex, and how can I go back and re-break it again?
Yeah, exactly. And there's always like, it's good to know about these things, because some of these things are changes within like how the default functionality works. These are improvements or things that, maybe this didn't, I don't know when this was introduced, but I'm sure this didn't exist for a period of time. And so now it's been introduced, and now it's just something that you have to sort of keep an eye out for and be like, okay, this, I know now that like you can do this, put that in my notebook for later.
It's so common too, like this sort of templating thing where you're taking user input and you're using it to replace a placeholder in a template, right? Like that happens all the time. It's not like some weird scenario where, the user's input is almost never placed in the actual, replace portion of the regex, match and replace. So anytime there's templating, this is something I'm going to keep in mind, because the context is so important in those scenarios, and being able to inject everything before your match. And it's not even that pre-pended string is a part of the match. It's not. It's just before the match. So it's very odd, and I think it'll break a lot of stuff. So shout out to Frans for an amazing challenge. This one was really superb. Is the only word I can come up with for it. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a very, very cool one. I liked it a lot.
All right, let's take a look at the next one here. Yeah. Oh man, this was nuts. This is the HackerOne disclosed 25K crit, which is kind of nuts. This is one of the things you think you'll probably never see, and then you see it. But what day was this that they released this? December 8th, HackerOne disclosed a critical SSRF on the analytics report functionality in HackerOne. And essentially this was, not to underscore or not to, undermine the coolness of this vulnerability, because it was very cool, but it was pretty much a textbook PDF render injection, and he was able to inject a iframe in a PDF renderer, and that iframe was able to point to the AWS metadata and pull AWS credentials and just get access to everything. And I don't know, man. I feel like I would have probably not looked for this as much on HackerOne because of how crazy a bug this is, and you would assume that they'd have their bases covered, but I guess that's not the case.
Yeah, it's kind of wild, because if you look at, I don't know if you expanded like the full submission, all the activity to look at what the actual report was, but like you literally just, you create a new report, you choose some filters, and then in the template, you go to the analytics and you go to create a new report, and then in the template thing, you just you put you just HTML inject, and it's GG.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's super, super crazy. This is really interesting because I was looking at this functionality not long ago.
No way. I hate
definitely
that.
Definitely after this was reported though. It wasn't before November 23rd when this was first submitted, but I was looking at this functionality. I was like, that's kind of weird. Why does it do that? That makes a lot of sense. This is really interesting.
Yeah, dude. The fact that they was able to get an iframe in there is kind of crazy. And you look at the exploit, and it's like he's like, all right, Etsy password. We're gonna hit, 169.254.169.254. He's just like going at it. And then the funny thing too is if you look at the comment, he says, I sent a message 10 minutes ago to all of these triagers, and he just pings all of the triagers that he can think of, which is amazing. But I mean, I would too, man. I'd be pinging people right off the bat if I submitted something like this. So it just goes to show, man, like even crazy security oriented companies that have had this type of bug reported multiple times on their own platform, can make these sort of mistakes as well, because not all of the developers are tied into this. And what kind of becomes everyday stuff for us doesn't necessarily become that sort of thing for all the developers, even in a security oriented organization. So it's encouraging to see, and it makes you, it kind of refreshes the knowledge that everything's vulnerable. It just takes time, Yeah, for sure. So
cool. Yeah, it's always nice, and I love that they disclose all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, so that one must have been a hard one for HackerOne to disclose. I don't know if they like to disclose that sort of thing. It seems to me that they try to put forth that precedent for the rest of the programs and stuff like that. But I'm sure Yobert, when he saw that report, kind of cringed a little bit, thinking, all right, gotta send that one to the rest of the
exactly.
folks. But no, it's good. It is good that they do that. Next I had on the list here, and I'm really excited about this one. Caido has finally finished the issue that I submitted months ago, and I guess I sort of cheated the system a little bit on this one. I submitted an issue to Caido saying, hey, I'd really like the search tab to be reworked, and they're like, okay, well, we prioritize the issues by upvotes, so we'll get to it if it gets upvoted. I'm like, I think I know some people that would like to upvote this. And so I ended up like tweeting out and calling on some of the critical thinking listeners to go upvote it. And all of a sudden it like skyrocketed to the top of the upvoted list to get a cool search functionality included into Caido, which is a very needed functionality, I think.
Yeah.
And they did it.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude.
They prioritized it. So Caido now has this really awesome, easy to use just search bar. And it's got also a Wireshark-esque query language associated with it, where you can query specific parts of the request in this URL bar and this sort of search bar inside of Caido. So I was really hyped about that. I've been using it a lot, and it's been mega helpful. And man, the only thing they need now is plugins, and then I'll be sated for a little while. I won't be knocking on their door every day being like, hey, where's my feature? Where's my feature? So
yeah, dude, I just need better scope management. That's like scope management and plugins.
Let me add a caveat to that, man. They messaged me after we talked about that on the pod. I don't know if we've released that episode yet or not, but and they said, dude, you can do that. It's just star the word that you want, star. And I tried it and it works. It doesn't say it in the little documentation. No, apparently it's been like that for a while. And they don't say it in the little documentation if you click the little question mark next to that section in the preset scope area. But
because I tested that and it wasn't like that. So I think that might be a bit of a change. But it used to be that, like, because I have a habit of when I add a domain, I do like, say it's example.com. I add example.com just by itself, and then I add star.example.com. And that catches both like root domain and then like any of the subdomains under it, because sometimes you'll go to example.com and it'll send you to www.example.com.
I thought you were doing just example star,
No, I mean, now I will.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to do it just like I do in Burp, because now.
Oh, that's what you're doing in Caido. Gotcha. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. You should be able to do the same thing that you're doing in Burp now in Caido with just star, word, star, and that will give you anything that has the word in the host name. So that's a big improvement. I'm happy to see that. So it looks like the wish list for both of us now is kind of down to those plugins. So It will be great to have some Python plugins, though. I love a good extensibility.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm looking, and
Joel,
definitely.
Joel is distracted.
It works.
Okay, great. That's good.
That's good. I like to see it.
Wow, validated right here on the
stuff
pod.
from the Caido team. I like to see when stuff works. So yes, that's definitely awesome.
Good shit, man. Cool. All right, let's jump over to the last thing on the news. We had the blind. Not blind. I almost said blind XSS. It's blind CSS Exfiltration research released by Powertoys. And once again, crazy. I just want to say, just because I'm a Caido fanboy and I love Caido, doesn't mean I have anything against Powertoys as a company. Their product, it's heavy. You know, it requires a lot of RAM, but it's amazing. And Burp is a phenomenal tool. And Powertoys research is so great. And this time around, it was Gareth releasing a blind CSS injection tool, which is such an interesting concept and a relatively new, I guess, attack vector or vulnerability type. Not something that I've heard about before this write-up, where he releases a tool for essentially being able to do it's like what XSS Hunter is, but for CSS, and being able to exfiltrate the contents of various input fields and text areas and that sort of thing. And the write-up is really detailed and includes a lot of, I guess, sort of research mentality in there as well, which is something we really like to see about how he figured out how many input fields there are by using the has and not selectors in CSS, and then chaining that together with cyclical import chain, I want to say is called technique, sort of coined in my mind by Donut, although there's another researcher, Pepe Vila, that has also released something almost the exact same time as Donut about CSS exfiltration, and using the import sort of directive in CSS to, along with some delaying and responding to HTTP requests, in order to create a chain where you can exfiltrate data very quickly and effectively out of CSS, via CSS, out of input fields. So really cool research here. You love to see it. And I'm excited to give it a shot. I haven't used the blind CSS. I almost said blind XSS again because it's just a habit. The blind CSS exfiltrator yet. And I'm sure the use cases are pretty niche, but I guarantee you will see this at a live hacking event sometimes because people always come up with the craziest shit.
Yeah, no, dude. This is I love this research. This is such interesting stuff. It's awesome. They actually shouted out to Donut and Pepe Vila.
They did.
In the research that this was this technique was based on that sort of work, the import chaining stuff. So it's very, very, very cool. I think CSS, I mean, we can kind of tell based on how Gareth has been doing CSS research for the past 2 years that CSS is definitely an unexplored territory. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff there. And they keep adding functionality too, right? They keep making it easier. They're adding more selectors to do different things with CSS instead of having to use SCSS or what's the other?
I don't know. You always see them in the Webpack or whatever.
But yeah, it's really, really cool stuff. I love this kind of research.
Yeah,
so.
I've as on the note of CSS sort of features expanding, I've got a couple areas in my pocket where, because I was doing some CSS based stuff as well when I was doing the post message based CSS injection to credit card exfiltration exploits. And I've got a couple areas on high impact programs where I can inject CSS in like a credit card number context, but I don't have all the gadgets I need to fully exfiltrate the card data. So I'm just waiting and waiting and waiting. There are a couple key features that I need CSS to release before I can actually start to exfiltrate that data. So I've been keeping a close eye on the CSS change logs because I know they're going to come out with it. And some of the stuff, one of the keys I can think of in particular, they say that they're going to release it. And I'm just like, when? Please release it for Christmas, please. So
that's funny. There's some large companies out there who are sweating bullets right now, just knowing that their credit card flow is insecure, but Justin's waiting for the CSS release.
Yep. All right, man. So that's it for the news this time. And what I was thinking for the rest of the show is to talk a little bit about the past year in Bug Bounty for the both of us, how our stats kind of landed, if we're satisfied with our performance over the past year, and also talk about some of the top earning bug classes that we were able to identify, and then also sort of go after some goals for the new year. I'm a little bit of some people say, you shouldn't talk about your goals and stuff like that in public before you accomplish them, because you get that sort of adrenaline hit by saying, all right, I'm going to do this, and that kind of takes away from the motivation. But I kind of get the opposite. I'm like, if I call my shot, then I gotta do that, and and so it's a little bit scary to come on a podcast, with several thousand people listening every week and sort of talk about it. But we'll see how it goes. I've definitely got some stuff I've got my eye on, and I think is the most effective way to accomplish my bug bounty goals. But we'll see if that changes as we get into the new year. But first, let's do the year in review. Do you want to go first, or should I?
Yeah, sure. We'll start small here because I'm not the full-time hacker here. You are. So
no.
Yeah. So I my breakdown was I submitted just under 25 reports, 23 reports this year, which is pretty good. That's about one every 2 weeks, give or take. So that's pretty solid considering I work a full-time job.
Yeah. You've had a busy year too. Promotion.
Yeah.
And such.
I had a crazy busy year. Yeah. All sorts of crazy things.
So many weddings and stuff like that.
Yeah. 2 cats in under a year.
Yeah.
So 30% crits, 17% high, 34% medium, 13% low, 4% none. So yeah, I'm about even between highs and crits, between mediums and crits, which kind of tells me that basically I either end up in the middle or I end up way at the top.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. Maybe it would be good to spend some time trying to focus on seeing if I can get some more of those highs next year, because high payouts are usually still quite good.
Yeah.
It's not all about focusing on that.
I think this makes sense too, because a lot of times when you look for critical vulnerabilities, but there's some like major precondition that's needed or mitigating factor, you land at a medium instead of a high, which is a little bit of a shame, but it is something that you see pretty often. So that makes sense to me that those would be about even, because about half the time they're going to have some weird thing that you can't quite work around, or even, when we work together, there's some preconditions that were required for some exploits that we just really couldn't work around. And because you can't really do anything if you don't have access to functionality, and sometimes that functionality is gated behind privileges or something like that. So
right, absolutely. Yeah. So the breakdown for what type of engagements these are mostly on, it was basically 50-50 for me. I'm excluding some of the smaller stuff, but it was essentially 50% bounty programs and 50% challenge programs, which is going to be like live hacking events, H1Cs, maybe, I don't know, pen tests are included in that. Maybe not.
I don't think so.
I don't know. But yeah, about 50-50 between live hacking events and bounty programs, which is pretty much expected for me. That's basically all I do for bug bounty is that, and then pen tests is the little bit of the portion that's on the side that's probably not in there.
Yeah. So I guess that's true. Pen tests are not probably included in these stats, which is interesting. I haven't done many pen tests, but I know you do them on a pretty regular basis, right?
Yeah, I try and keep them going on somewhat of a regular cycle. It's just a good, you can do them at the same time as you do bounty stuff if you have the capacity for it. And I think it's a good source of income. Like, even if you're just a pen tester and let's say you book them back to back every 2 weeks, I want to say the pay is, it's a couple $1,000s per pen test per person. So if you multiply that twice a month, 24 a year, it's, even if it's $2,000 per pen test, right? That's almost 50K a year, right? So
that's awesome.
It's a good amount of side income if you can do them all the time.
Yeah, that's great, dude. I think the other thing that comes to mind on this sort of thing is that you've mentioned in the past that you feel like the areas that you research take a lot of upfront investment. So it's not as easy for you to just kind of hop in and say, all right, I've got 3 hours, let me go find a bug. It's more like, all right, I'm going to hack this target now. This is going to be my thing for the next 2 weeks. I'm only going to think about that, and that's going to be my life,
One of the interesting things I've noticed about my hacking style is that, like, it's not it's not so much like the bounty is cool and stuff, but I'm more enticed by the challenge. And so when I see something that's like been set up to be challenging, that's what really will get me like, I want to get around that. So a good example, and this is a public program, Hyatt. Hyatt is they have a bug bounty program. They pay pretty well. It is, yeah. Hyatt hotels. They pay pretty well. I think they have 10K crits. And I was spending a lot of time looking at their mobile app, and it's very, very intensely obfuscated. And that just it's really grinding my gears, because I'm like, I want to know how this works. I want to dive into this. I want to find like what's the juice that they're hiding behind the walls or whatever. So it's that kind of stuff but it's like huge upfront investment. Like you said, like I'm going to spend maybe more than a month just trying to figure out how this stuff is working and get the ins and outs. But once I'm there, right, I'm ahead of everybody else. So that's kind of the risk reward, right? Is that once you spend that time and you get past that, you get the understanding, it takes everybody else the amount of time to get there too.
I know that this is a little challenging for you, but when you do something like this, you should probably stick with that program for like a year, Joel. You should probably like not just throw that whole investment in the trash and move on to the next program the next time you see a shiny object.
I see how it works. I figured out, I'm like, okay, that's cool. What next?
Yeah. Finally, Joel presses enter. He sees the code. Sweet. Okay. Well, I got a private program invite.
Dude, I wish I was lying, because like that is honestly like that's how like the dopamine feels. Where I'll finally I'll solve it, and then I'll be like, oh, all right, well, that's not exciting anymore. Like, what now? What do I go like figure out how this works now? So I need to work on that a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about this in the goals section, but I'll let you go ahead and why don't you give your year review, and then we can.
I'll do mine, and then we'll strategize together on how to solve your bug bounty.
My ADHD.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, 2023. I actually didn't compare it with last year. I kind of wish I
didn't either.
I kind of wish I had done that. So let me see. Can I actually just press this and change it? So yeah, it looks like my last year was actually slightly better than this year as far as performance goes. And I'm going to go ahead and reselect the correct items here, but because I don't have the whole thing up for what it looks like for last year. But just a quick look at the numbers suggests that last year was slightly higher performing than this year. But this year I had exactly 100 submissions, which makes me feel great. And I can't submit any more bugs in 2023 now, because I'm locked into that. I have to stick with that, which is really cool. I got 125 payments, which means that it's kind of weird. It's kind of odd that they say payments, because it could be multiple bounties on the same report. That's happened to me quite a few times. It could be collabs that I've been paid out from, or they could be talking about payments as in like how many times it actually paid out to your bank account, in which case I know at the beginning of the year they were capping payouts at 10K. So that's a little bit odd, but any combination of those. And then my breakdown as far as severity was 18% critical, 26% high, 46% medium, 6% low, and 4% none. And I looked into the none, and I was like, man, did I really not even care enough to assign a severity rating to this before I submitted it? And I believe those 4% none are like reimbursement reports and stuff like that for purchasing hardware, or getting bonuses for doing well at a specific thing. They sometimes ask you to submit a report and they'll close it, and they'll just pay you a bonus on top of that. So that's what those were. I was really surprised to see I only have 6% low. But I went back and looked at it, and it seems like it's accurate. There's not very many bugs that actually came through as low in the end. And I think another part of this is that there was a lot of dupes as well that might have been paid out as lows, but they didn't care to adjust the severity from medium to low because it was a dupe, so they just didn't bother to change it. So that could be where some of the thing is too, where most of those are landing in medium rather than a low, and that low number is looking artificially low. But yeah, I was pretty happy with 18% crits. I went back and looked at it, and those are all like true crits, which I was happy about.
Nice.
And I feel like the crit to high ratio is pretty solid as well, and kind of expected for where this will lay out. So I was pleased with that distribution.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I was just comparing while you were giving your rundown. I was just comparing mine to last year.
Yeah.
And I think I must have had like a slump last year or something, because
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even submit a crit last year.
No, I don't believe that.
And I 4x'd my bounties between last year and this year.
Did you really? Wow.
So, yeah.
Congrats, dude.
Yep. So definitely, don't let one bad year ruin your your mentality, because you can definitely get into little slumps and not have the best year. But next year, look forward to next year, right?
Sure.
What did you not do right this year? So actually, let's go over that, because I think we both put some goals together here to kind of go over like maybe things that we could do better next year, and things that we want to work on next year.
One other thing before we hop into goals that I wanted to share was the challenge to bug bounty ratio that you mentioned before was a lot higher for me. It was 73% challenges and 26% bug bounty. And so roughly 75% of my reports were being submitted to HackerOne live hacking events or hacking challenges or campaigns or something like that, which I think is pretty telling, because when you're doing the live hacking events every other month, there's rarely enough energy for you to put more time into other programs. And I think probably this 26%, I want to say this percentage would be even higher if we look earlier in the year before Q4, where the bug bounty live hacking events sort of slow down a little bit. And I was focusing more on other programs. So really the predominant amount of my income is coming from the live hacking events, which is a little bit scary for me moving into 2024, because I'm hoping to start a family in 2024, and I know that that's going to be really busy, and I might not make it out to the live hacking events quite as much. So we'll see how that manifests, but there's always the opportunity to participate remotely too. So I think I'll probably be taking advantage of that.
Yeah, dude, for sure. If you actually change your breakdown from like yearly or whatever to quarterly, you can see that over time. Like I see it in mine as well, where
I'll check that
there
out.
are basically large spikes where it's just like all challenge, like that whole quarter is just like all challenge submissions, or maybe mostly challenge submissions. So yeah, I have a lot of the same thing. I think it's just very difficult to balance it, right? Where it's like, you want to take time off too, and like not just be like hacking 24/7. So after an event, that's a great time to take a little breather. And then usually the next event sort of starts to come up, and then you're doing prep, and here you go again, right? So 100%. It's really cool.
And just to be clear, for those of you listening, the graphs that we're looking at can be found at hackerone.com/hacker_dashboard/dashboards/performance. So if you go to your hacker dashboard, there's a performance tab at the top that you can find.
The easy way is just on that little sidebar or whatever in the menu, you click dashboard, and then there's a tab at the top called performance. And that'll give you all the graphs, all the breakdowns. You can change the time ranges. You can add filters. You can see your overall numbers, all the everything that you can imagine should be there. So definitely go check out.
The other stat that I wanted to talk about is the payouts by bugs for me. And I'm curious to hear yours too, Joel. But for me, I was looking at the bugs that I made the most money on this year, and it looks like IDOR is like a substantial amount of my income. Let me run the numbers roughly in my head. It's like 1/6 or 1/7 of my income comes from IDORs. I had one huge XSS payout, so XSS is my next one, but it would be a little bit less if I didn't have that one huge XSS payout. And then the next one is improper authentication generic, and then I think beneath that as well is the broken access controls stuff. And so those are the big categories for me, which kind of shows my testing style is largely oriented towards some client side, but also the other one on here was information disclosure is a huge one. And so my style is a little bit moved towards information disclosure and IDOR and access control stuff, as well as authentication. And I think code injection came in at like 4th or 5th on the list. So that one makes an appearance as well. But I'm mostly looking for authorization and authentication related issues along with client side stuff.
Yeah. So for me, my top one was a privilege escalation. I'm I'm not really sure. I have some ideas as to why that probably is. I think a lot of things probably fall into that.
Yeah, it's
but
a pretty wide
that's not really
category.
what I've been looking for. The next two, which are kind of what I would expect, excluding no weakness. I have a lot. Like my third highest one is no weakness. So either I'm not setting it or H1's not setting it. I think I always set it though. I don't know.
Yeah, it's broken. I promise.
It's not me. Okay. But the next two named ones are information disclosure and insecure storage of sensitive information. Right.
Yeah, that
so
one
those are basically the same
an appearance
thing
on my list as well.
Yeah, and I kind of view those as essentially PII, right? So it's user data, user PII, maybe a lack of access controls that's leading to PII disclosure or something like that. So those two kind of make sense. And then everything else, I've got some OS command injection, reflective XSS, couple, functionality bypass. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows what that is?
Some more random things.
This is a little bit challenging. I think this is an area that HackerOne could improve on as far as the classification of bugs go, and kind of helping us sort of formularize or organize our hacking data to represent what kind of vulnerabilities we're finding. Because these vulnerability categories are so large, it's kind of hard to select the correct one. And then also, when you're writing the report, the last thing you really want to do is spend time scrolling through this giant list of 200 different things you could select for the weaknesses when you're just trying to get the report in and you're excited and you're kind of on that high. So I think this is the best data we've got, and it's definitely an improvement from last year, the way that they were doing the dashboards and stuff like that over the past couple of years. But I think there's definitely still room for improvement here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to be able to see this breakdown in the granularity that we have it.
Let's talk about the goals for 2024.
Okay.
You want to? I guess you started on the year in review, so I'll start on this one.
Yeah, go for it.
So, and actually, I wanted to kind of talk through with you something sort of as a friend talking about goals for 2024. So obviously the podcast has become a big part of my life in 2023 because we launched it early 2023 and we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of launching it. Around this time last year, I was messaging Joel being like, hey man, maybe we should start a podcast. And so that's cool. With that, I am trying to think about what is the best technique or the best approach to bug bounty for this year that will give me the best ROI for bug bounty and also for critical thinking, right? And so I want to be able to tell you guys about cool stuff every week. And I want to come in here pumped, like I've just found a bug and share some awesome technical shit with you guys and just kind of share that joy that comes along with bug bounty. And I think probably the best way for me to do that is to try to bring research a little bit more into my flow, because I could go in there and I could find a bunch of access control issues and IDORs and stuff like that. And sometimes those are really engaging bugs that are really exciting and very fun. But a lot of times those also just kind of pay the bills. And what's really more exciting is oh, wow. If I'm replacing a string, I can actually insert the pre-match into the replacement by using this syntax and just being boom, my mind is blown, and bringing these sort of cool tips. And we've talked a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff, client-side quirks and post-message related stuff that's really exciting. So I think in 2024, the best way to add value to my own wallet as a bug bounty hunter and add value to critical thinking is probably to do more research-oriented stuff. What do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. I think doing cool, unique sort of taking technologies and finding the nuances, especially for bug bounty. We've talked about this a little bit with there's some blog posts out there that are here's all the ways to do X, Y, window and top and all the ways to reference window
references and character
that kind
sets.
Of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. It's very difficult to find that kind of stuff unless you found it and bookmarked it. And so going the extra step and being there's no research on this, let's create research on that and let's give it to the community. I think that is a really powerful opportunity to share knowledge, unique knowledge and research and get cool opportunities and ideas and all that kind of stuff, plus find cool bugs.
I'm a little bit unsure how that, I mean, obviously I could pick a specific area and then come up with a sort of artificial scenario and then do, exploit that scenario and have that be the research. But the kind of way I've done it up until this point is like, let me look at an actual target. Let me look at the way that people are actually implementing things, break that, and then turn it into research. And so
Right.
I'm wondering if I'm not doing enough on the turn it into research part, and obviously we've had a lot of cool stuff to talk about this year. So I'm satisfied with that. And it was a great year, but I'm wondering if I should approach it more from like an actual research perspective, or if I should focus on really attacking what's in front of me and attacking what I know is actually being implemented by these, 20 to 30 companies we assess every single year.
Yeah. So I think, a lot of the research stuff comes like naturally, right? So what happens is you'll like spend some time exploring something. Maybe it goes a little deeper than you might have expected. And then you kind of are like, I've seen this on other apps. Like, let me spend some time like figuring out how this works and like finding this bug across other platforms, etc. So I think that is probably like, I don't think you're like underdoing it. You know what I mean? I think as a full-time researcher, it's difficult to find the balance between research you want to publish and research you want to keep to yourself.
Yeah,
and
that's another thing as well.
Also then doing that research while hacking, all that kind of like it's difficult, right? So yeah, but I feel like overall we're doing a pretty good job, and we'll just spend a little more time on like some research.
I see it on your list as well for the goals for 2024 that you've got unique research on there. And I think also one of the things in the past is like, I'm not particularly a Twitter, clout person or I don't have a lot of motivation to go and take these research things and write like a massive blog post about it and then post it, to share it. And even though I would like to share it, it's just, I don't see the most ROI for my time in doing that in the past. But now I think with critical thinking a little bit more established and the subscribers on the Discord and that sort of thing, there's a little bit more of an impetus for me to say, okay, well, let me take one day, one calendar day here and devote it into taking this research and like getting it into a document and then getting some people to review it and that sort of thing and getting it published. And so we'll see how that manifests itself in the new year. I think we will see some more stuff come out, especially to the premium Discord and definitely to the world as well, since we have a little bit more of a focus on that now.
Yeah, absolutely. I did have unique research in there for myself. I mean, it's kind of what we just talked about, which is basically, I'd like to find some, cool tools or cool, architectures, whatever, infrastructure. I just want to do some deep dives on stuff, figure out how stuff works. And some of that I think will be spurred by the ongoing hacking and research that I'm doing like outside, but also just maybe from the community as well as friends as we discuss and see different things on the internet. Yeah.
And I think just going back to the whole conversation surrounding research for research sake rather than research for hacking a company's sake. I think the research for research sake, sort of like James Kettle style stuff is super great. But then you've got that extra step of like, all right, now I've got to figure out how to scan for this across all of the bug bounty programs. And if you don't have like a very identifiable fingerprint for that, like for example, right. I'm thinking about doing some post message based research. Sure, I can scrape all the JS files and find every message, reference to post message or whatever, but it's not going to be every single reference to post message. It's going to be like a very specific subset of those. So it's a little bit harder to programize that sort of thing, which I'm a little bit intimidated by. But also, you see some great results come out of that. So maybe it's something I should try. I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see what else we got on the list here. Yeah, let me. I'll talk about this next one, and then we'll kind of go back and forth because I've got a couple more than yours. So the next one I have on my list is non-traditional automation stuff that I'd like to do in 2024, and that includes JS monitoring, which is something we've talked about a lot here to kind of alert when new features are being added to applications that you already have a large context for, and source code monitoring for things that you actually have the source code for, which I think will be really big for me. If I can identify some vulnerable patterns in open source software that's being either propagated to a bunch of companies or is actually having a bug bounty program themselves, then I think that could be a source of semi-passive income where it's like, hey, there's very likely a bug here, go check it out, and it takes maybe an hour to exploit it, and you can get a report out of it, but it's not the traditional subdomain takeover or whatever XSS that you see in automation.
Yeah, dude, I feel like that kind of pipeline is like really useful, really useful for those who don't see the cat Bagel. Miss Bagel is climbing on me right now.
Very cute cat.
She's trying to nap. Yes, but no, I think that kind of pipeline is very almost necessary for full-time hackers, because the reality is, if you don't have something like that, then you're going to be spending time looking for things to hack. And that takes time, which takes away from your money.
Hacking, yeah.
Yeah, right. And so like if you don't spend some time building an automation or some sort of monitoring or whatever that's like constantly feeding you new things to look at, then you're going to have to take your own time out of your hacking or extra time, right? Where you could be making money to go then find those targets or spend time looking at those things and tracking down those signals. And, it just makes it a whole lot easier for you to have basically like a little assistant kind of who's just like, hey, take a look at this, take a look at that.
And sort of refreshing your context too, because we kind of talked about that before as well, of like, you kind of lose context for a specific program after a little while. But if you've if you've taken notes with code, that was one of the big takeaways that I had from Sam Erb's episode, was if you've taken notes with code and you've said, hey, there was a reason why I thought that it was really important that I should alert on this specific string, and then those neural pathways refire a lot more quickly and you can get right back into where you were, versus if you're coming in with no context. So that's something I'm currently doing on a couple programs, but the pipeline isn't like fully built out, and sometimes my scripts kind of flake out or whatever. So that's something that I'll be doing more of in 2024 and getting a good pipeline in place for. All right, what's the next one on your list?
I wanted to be more consistent with reports and hacking. I think we talked about that. I'm about 1 every 2 weeks right now. I think I'd like to get that more, just in general across the board. I'd like to be doing more hacking, submitting more reports, looking at more stuff. It's very difficult to find the time and the energy with all the million things I have going on to sit down and like spend some quality time hacking and finding bugs. I find that a lot of the time I'm just kind of like looking at stuff and noticing interesting things, but it takes a little bit more to get it to sort of that endpoint.
Yeah.
So I'd like to be a little more consistent on that for sure.
Yeah, consistency as a part-time hunter is difficult because it ebbs and flows with your job, with your personal life, with all this other stuff. And the next one on my list is trying to accomplish all of this like lofty goals stuff that I've got for the podcast and for bug bounty hunting in normal business hours, in an 8-hour day. Because here's what I've come to realize, Joel, is like you can accomplish really amazing stuff if you work 80 hours a week, and it's not that hard, besides the working 80 hours a week part, which is, just physically and sort of mentally challenging. If you're working double the amount as other people, you're going to have crazy, oversized results. Right. And that's just kind of to be expected and not that crazy. The crazy thing to me is when people work less than other people or less than expected and still get outsized results, right? So that's kind of something that, and that kind of shows that you've really got your system down, or you're really looking at something differently,
or you got really lucky.
or you got really lucky, right? Which I feel like that's the case every single time I submit a bug. But the data would suggest otherwise, considering either that or I'm the luckiest human on earth. And so for me, 2024, I want to limit that and really just work within a certain period of time, whether it be a sliding 8-hour window or a flexible 8-hour window, whatever it is, and then just work more efficiently and still accomplish great results within that time frame.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really interesting takeaway. Is like, what you mentioned is that like being able to do the same thing that other people do in less amount of time means that you can do more than them, or you can make more than them, or whatever. Like, and that's a really, like, if you can figure out how to optimize what you're doing to do it in less time, that's huge, right? So I love that. I feel very similarly, which is like, I'm doing a ton of things, and generally I'm pretty good about like keeping it within work hours, but I also feel like the burden of doing all those things makes it very challenging to keep all of them going at the same time.
Yeah.
So maybe it's, rebalancing them to do them on certain days instead of everything every day, or whatever it is. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's definitely something to be worked on.
Yeah. And just for those of you listening that might feel like you haven't achieved the sort of success that you're looking for, whether it be in bug bounty or career and stuff like that. One tip that kind of goes contrary to what we're talking about right now is that if really you just want the success, one of the best ways to get that is just put in more time, and you got to decide whether that's going to be healthy for you, or whether you're in a position in life where you're going to benefit from that, and whether that's actually what you want with your goals. But if you're really just looking for success, you can probably find that by doing it more. And I've noticed this in multiple areas of life, not just bug bounty, but fitness as well was one of the other ones. I used to be doing a 3x5 program where I would do 3 sets of 5 reps and once a week, but then I switched to twice a week, 5x5. And I noticed the results dramatically changed just because I'm pushing more weight and I'm spending more time doing it, And so I think that's another hack, but obviously comes at the cost of a bunch of time and effort. So
yeah, totally.
The next thing I had on my list was I want to hack more IoT stuff, or I want to do more hardcore source code review. And those are not entirely disjointed from each other, but I'll just say, Joel, that experience that we had of hacking on that live hacking event together earlier this year, and we just had like this massive Python code base, and we were just tearing it apart and finding all the sources in syncs. And even now with the word fence stuff we've done over the past couple of weeks, doing a lot of PHP source code review and that sort of thing, I just realized how much I love actually having source code. It's phenomenal,
Okay, dude. I have a program. For us.
What have you got?
I've been working on something.
Can you say it? Okay.
I can. I don't know if we should.
No, don't say it. Don't say it.
Because I'd like to work on it with you.
All right.
But it's a public program, but yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, we'll see how it goes. I would definitely like to do more of that. And I love the concept of IoT stuff being where like you dump the firmware and then you get the source code and now you're doing source code review. That's the ideal situation. But this is going back to what we were talking about before. IoT stuff, the bounties aren't good enough relative to the time you have to invest. Really, IoT bounties need to be high 5 figures to make it worth the time if you're a decent web hunter, right? Because you can go to programs like PayPal and Shopify where they're paying massive bounties for web stuff, and find stuff quicker than you would on an IoT-based program, and it's easier, and your eyes aren't bleeding and you're not having to fight with hardware, and there's not a bunch of setup without the thought of return on investment. So I think IoT space needs to expand its bounties and pay a little bit more into the 5-figure range, and some even in the 6-figure range, to see the real big sort of attraction from other hunters that have diverse skill sets as well. So one of those two will be good. And then this is the other thing that I wanted to talk about. And this is kind of I think probably something that you and I both have on our goals for 2024 would be this concept of influencing tool creation, or influencing the sort of development in the industry that we'd like to see that we don't necessarily have time to do, right? So I've just been really blown away by how awesome the critical thinking community is, and how you guys have taken a lot of the ideas that we presented here on the podcast and actually turned them into tools. And I think that that's something that could be scaled well, like us mentioning these sort of things, us having sort of the inside scoop from a lot of top hunters, taking it to the podcast, giving it to the public, and then the public turning this into actual actionable tools that can be used by all hackers and making it a little bit more accessible. So that's something I definitely want to keep doing in 2024.
Yeah, for sure. Same here. I want to keep working on that all that kind of like influencer
positive change.
This is like a whole new, like there's this is a whole new space, I think, for both of us. So it's definitely been interesting, all the stuff that we've learned in the last year.
And
so
influencing
really,
little, kind of has a little bit of a negative connotation, but really at the end of the day, it's educating, it's sharing knowledge, right? Which is what that this whole content creation thing is about, is like coming on here, giving that knowledge, okay, so there's the knowledge piece and there's also the energy piece, right? Because, you can come in here and, man, like sometimes I've been on this podcast and I'm like freaking grabbing my mic so tight and I'm like yelling into the microphone because I'm so hype about these sort of things, right? And that's great. That's great to share with the community, and the community has shared with me that is a source of a lot of energy for them, and can lead to the development of some really awesome tools that I've seen. So definitely excited for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing on mine was I want to hack more web stuff, honestly.
Okay, so we're flipping.
I hack some web stuff.
Yeah.
We are basically flipping, because I've done a lot of IoT stuff. I do source code review like all the time. Like it's all mobile. It's just like reading code, and like I've done a lot of that kind of stuff. And it's not that I'm bored of it. It's just that like I want to do new stuff. I want to learn new things. I want to get better at stuff. Like I feel like there's a part of like there's a whole bunch of vulnerabilities that I am not good at, that I'd like to be better at, and I haven't been good at them because in the web space, just because like I don't do them as much. Like I don't exploit them as often. I'm not looking at those technologies as often, so it's just something that I'm not as familiar with, and I definitely would like to get there with it. So
sweet, man. Well, we can trade a little bit. I feel comfortable with almost every web-based vulnerability that I'm aware of. Cool. And so we can trade off knowledge there, and you can teach me how to do some good source code review and IoT hacking.
Absolutely,
should be great, man. Alrighty, dude, I think that's a wrap. You got anything else you want to say before we kick it to 2024?
No, honestly, this was a great year. Thanks to everybody for listening to the podcast, being with us on this this first year. It's been really exciting, and I'm looking forward to what happens next year.
Yep. Same here. I really appreciate the community, and thanks for a great year, Critical Thinking listeners.
Yeah,
See
absolutely.
you guys.
Peace.